Good evening.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Kathy Trent told us earlier that she wouldn't be here, but we kept inviting her and told her that she's welcome to come if she could free up her schedule. But Steve Dragna is here with us this evening, and so we're going to go ahead with the forum as planned, and we begin with the prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle them the fire of divine love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Let us pray, O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit does instruct the hearts of the faithful. Grant that by that same Holy Spirit we may be truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. As I said, I'm Father John DeSell. I'm the pastor of St. Raymond's, and I want to welcome all of you here tonight. I see a lot of faces I don't recognize, so I think you're guests this evening, so I'm glad to have you here. But now I'm going to turn everything over to Bob Laird, who will be our moderator this evening. Bob is the chairman of our Religious Freedom and Marriage Committee. He's also the vice president of the Cardinal Newman Society, which evaluates colleges and high schools and for their Catholic programs, and he also used to be the head of the Family Life Office for the Diocese of Arlington. So, and before that, when he didn't have anything else to do, he was a colonel in the Army. So thank you.
Thank you, Father. Well, Chief. Well, we're pleased to have Dr. Steve Dragna with us tonight, candidate for the 42nd District of the Virginia House of Delegates. Here's a format for the evening. What we've agreed upon is that there would be a 5-minute opening statement, and then he'll take questions. And I'll direct the questions to you, and then you have 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes. You don't have to take all 2 minutes. 2 minutes to respond. And for the audience, if you have a question, my team back here will take the questions and then sort through them and, work it out so that we consolidate them and review them and everything like that. We'd like to have a formal setting here. I'd ask that no clapping or hand waving or sign waving or cheering during the forum. There'll be an opportunity at the end to do that. At around, when we run out of questions, or around 8:50, I'll ask for a closing statement. And we have a hard stop at 9 o'clock. So before you have an opportunity to talk, 2 questions. Question number 1, Nats or Astros?
Nats in 5.
Okay, the next question was sweep or 5?
5.
5, okay. Take it.
All right. First of all, testing, 1, 2. Can everyone hear me reasonably well? Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. I am indeed Steve Dragna. It is my honor to be one of the 2 candidates to represent you and this district in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm happy that so many of you took the opportunity to come out this evening. I look forward to your questions and to trying to put into an appropriate context for you what this particular election is all about. Like many of you, I have come to conclude that the extreme hyper-partisan nature of our national politics has had an unfortunate, a deleterious effect on our ability to get things done here in the Commonwealth as well. The Virginia way, as we used to know it, has largely ceased to exist, and I think we need to work on making that the order of the day again. The fundamental principle of my campaign is actually very simple. I am running in order to return our district's representation to the mainstream political center and back from the extreme political fringe to which my opponent has taken it, and by extension, to return our legislative focus to the kinds of kitchen table issues that our families and most people in our district really care about. Things like the economy, taxes, jobs and workforce development, transportation in all its forms, commuting, the quality of our roads and infrastructure, mass transit, new innovative options to shorten our commutes and move goods and services more efficiently, and so on. Public education and public safety. Those are the core issues on which I believe most people really focus their attention. What really brings to mind the other issues, however, are when an individual, like my opponent, chooses to pursue an extreme and divisive agenda that focuses on fairly radical socio-political initiatives. Among those are, of course, the infamous bill, and I will be more than happy to talk about that during the course of the evening, as well as a raft of other initiatives that we'll talk about, things that really inject government into our everyday lives, into control of our economy, into changing the fundamental precepts upon which our economy and indeed our way of life are based. And I think we'll have the opportunity to talk about those at some length this evening. With respect to the choice that you have before you, I would submit to you with some humility that I think I am the better positioned candidate in order to represent your views. And I think I can say with a fair degree of certainty, there is a high likelihood that I have walked in your shoes. I served for 13 years as a civilian employee of our federal government and the national security community. I understand many of the unique challenges that federal civil servants face. I was proud to wear the uniform of our country's Army for 15 years and understand those challenges and demands that it places on our families. And since 2002, I have been in the business world in a variety of firms, from startups to multi-million-dollar global enterprises, to a boutique global solution provider with work around the globe, working across cultures and across languages, and most recently as the founder and managing director of my own small business, which gives me a unique appreciation for the challenges that small and independent businesses face. Fundamentally, what I would like to see, and what I suggest to you is most important, is that we as a Commonwealth, and particularly in our legislature, that we get back to basics. Excuse me. That we have our legislative focus be on those everyday quality of life issues, the things that affect your financial well-being, the future and the opportunities that will or perhaps may not be there for your children and your children's children. The opportunities for future generations to keep Virginia as a place in which all enjoy virtually unlimited opportunity and can achieve the full potential of their God-given talents. Over the course of the evening, I look forward to responding to your questions and addressing the issues that matter most to you. I encourage you to follow up with me after the evening is over if you have lingering concerns, anything that you would like to raise. But fundamentally, I believe that our Commonwealth's best days are still ahead of it, and I encourage you, if you find that you agree with me at the evening's end, to lend me your support on November 5th. Thanks very much for your attention.
Well, since you've already brought up a couple topics, let's get right into it. Here's a question. There's been several questions on the abortion issue that's already come up. So abortion, it was a topic of considerable debate during the 2019 General Assembly session. Introduced bills sought, among other things, to significantly loosen restrictions on third trimester abortions, to remove the requirement that the second trimester abortions be performed in hospitals, to repeal the ultrasound-informed consent law, and even to designate abortion as a fundamental right by adding the, quote, right to reproductive choice to the Virginia Human Rights Act. What are your stance on proposals such as these?
refresh my memory. Question answer time is 2 minutes.
2, right.
Oh, I just want to make sure.
3
minutes.
3.
Great. All right.
Sorry.
Well, but I will remember the biblical directive that blessed are the brief, for they shall be elected. Folks, let me be as direct and transparent as I can be. I make no apology for being pro-life. That said, we need to strike a balance and achieve that which is possible based on consensus across our Commonwealth. And I think Majority Leader Todd Gilbert put the matter most accurately. Abortion remains a controversial topic in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Late-term abortion does not. I happen to have here a copy of my opponent's bill, and I encourage you to go visit my website and read the bill in its entirety. Don't take my word for it. Don't take at face value her statements that she's been misconstrued and that the bill is all about making provision for emergency treatment of non-survivable birth defects. The bill says very clearly that any physician who is licensed may terminate or attempt to terminate a human pregnancy on any woman with no reference to age, and that in the event of third trimester abortions, only one physician needs to certify, no longer 3 are required, and that it may be performed solely on the basis of either a threat of the death of the woman, which reasonable people could argue, or if it could impair the mental health of the woman, not further defined. I think this creates a very tidy legal construct to allow anyone up to the moment of birth to demand on an abortion by claiming that this will mentally impair me, and the only certifying authority could be, in fact, not the woman's own general physician or obstetrician, but in fact the abortionist who has made a conscious decision to perform late-term abortions and whose paycheck depends upon it. I find that to be barbaric, quite frankly. In addition, you can't see it here, but if you look at the margin where the highlighting is, and onto another page, the entire section of the existing law on informed consent would be struck, including threats to the health of the woman, however risky, what's involved in the procedure, the right to change one's mind, the right not to be coerced or pressured by the practitioner into completing the process, or denying the woman access to information on the full range of pre- and postnatal care options and adoption and baby Moses law options. And I think that such extremism has no place in Virginia, and if I am elected, I will certainly resist them to the very limits of my legislative ability.
Thank you. Let's sort of on this related issue, but not, and we'll go back to abortion. There's a whole bunch of abortion questions here that I'm filtering through. In 2019, the Virginia General Assembly considered ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA. The language which has already been used to challenge and overturn restrictions on taxpayer funding for abortion in other states. What's your view of the ERA and its abortion implications?
I think in relation to this question, it is very important to draw a fundamental distinction between the issue of equality under the law for women, let me emphasize full equality for women under the law, and the language and implications of the Equal Rights Amendment language as drafted. The bottom line, I again try to be very transparent, is that I believe that it is ultimately deceptive of proponents of the ERA as currently written to attempt to push through language that was crafted in the early 1970s to address societal problems that were prevalent at that time, and to resurrect that language after everyone acknowledged that the amendment failed to meet the requisite timelines for passage by state legislatures, because it's a canard. It is an attempt to take that outdated language to create conditions in which it is possible to ram through extreme and socially divisive social policies. Let me again be clear. If anyone can, let me back up. I do not know anyone, myself included, who is against equality for women under the law. And I believe that anywhere we find instances of that, it can and should be stamped out by statute, by promulgating new laws or amending existing ones. But to take 40-year-old language and try to ram it through in a cavalier fashion to open up an amendment to our Constitution and all of the potential unintended consequences, to in effect construe that abortion on demand therefore is a constitutional right because men don't have the same potentiality to become pregnant, or that women should be able to play football in the National Football League and then demand a reasonable accommodation so they aren't tackled too hard, or that men should decide that they want to play field hockey and be able to, play in women's leagues, and so on and so on. I think it's a solution in search of a problem that really doesn't exist on a constitutional level. So in sum, I am very much in favor of stamping out discrimination or unequal treatment under the law for women. I am also opposed to ratification and implementation of the constitutional amendment as currently crafted because of that potential for a raft of unintended consequences. Again, if anyone wants to follow up on that over the course of the evening or subtleties, I'm more than happy to address them. But in broad strokes, that's where I stand.
Well, thank you. Thank you. If abortion's a private matter between a woman and her doctor, why, as some advocate, should public funds be used to pay for it?
Well, it begs the question, should public funds be used to pay? I am fundamentally pro-life. I viscerally reject the notion that taxpayer funds should be used for that purpose. I think one could make an argument that if those who are truly indigent, who are on Medicaid, and find themselves in a situation where the life of the mother or irreparable physical harm were to be a very real risk, one can make an argument that there needs to be some provision. In other words, you can't condemn someone to risk death because she is indigent or financially or mentally incapable without an appropriate guardian of undergoing such a procedure. One could also talk about perhaps rape and incest for people who, again, are indigent or don't have the resources. But I think, as we all acknowledge, that those kinds of cases constitute an extremely small percentage of the total cases. It is a mainstream and fundamental precept that the tax dollars of 300 and some odd million Americans ought not to be used to pay for essentially an elective procedure that terminates the life of a scientifically and fundamentally unique human life. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Do you want to take a water break?
No, thank you. It's that time of year, full transparency. Autumn and mold spores are just murder on me, and it's just the way it is.
I had it right here. What do you see as the greatest challenge to our district?
Greatest challenge to our district, besides the fact that I'm not representing it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I had to sneak one in, I'm sorry. From a philosophical standpoint, I think the greatest challenge to our district is that we have lost the Virginia way. We generally, at the legislative level, and I will tell you honestly, ladies and gentlemen, at the neighborhood level, we don't really talk to one another anymore. I've knocked on thousands of doors, and with my team collectively, we've knocked on over 10,000. And people in various neighborhoods do, as you read in the media, self-select and self-segregate. We live atomized lives where we have two-income spouses, and we come home and we're tired, and we stay within our four walls. If we have children, we go to their activities. At my daughter's soccer games and practices, I lost count of the number of parents who I saw after 2 or 3 minutes getting on their cell phones and looking at things from work or watching a movie or whatever they were doing. And I think we've lost something. So I think on a fundamental level, it's important that we keep open minds, that we be willing to have friendly and open debates with our neighbors about political issues, economic issues, social issues, and so on. From a legislative perspective, I think the greatest threat to the district and our Commonwealth is this gradual, creeping resurgence of a school of thought that says government knows better than all of you and I do, that government knows better how to spend and invest your money. Government knows better what jobs are required rather than the market. Government knows better how your children need to be taught, and to sort of create a barrier between you and your children, and to put government in between. So I think we need to get back to basics and make sure that parental rights are respected and enshrined, to make sure that we remain committed fundamentally to a free enterprise system with appropriate checks and balances and left and right guardrails set by government. But I think those are the two main things that I would identify as fundamental problems that we need to address.
Well, thank you. Give me a little break. The General Assembly has passed considered legislation mandating that private health plans in Virginia cover abortion, contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs, forcing employers with religious or moral objections to violate their consciences. Other proposed legislation would have denied religious employers and service providers the ability to operate consistently with their beliefs on human sexuality and marriage. Where do you stand on these proposals?
What I would say is that our legislative guidelines, our laws, should mirror the separation of church and state that have been a fundamental precept of our republic from its inception. What does that mean in practical terms? I think it means that for lay issues, anything outside a religious organization, we have to live under the law of the land, whether we like it or not. We can always try and continue to try over time to change laws that we don't like. We certainly can try to persuade others to change their minds and see things the way we do. But if the law of the land is that secular or business employers or health plans must provide certain types of coverage, there isn't much we can do about it. Now, religious organizations have, I would argue, a different standard. If a fundamental theological precept of any religious organization, and again, whether that's Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Asian, Buddhist, or any other, it really shouldn't matter. I don't believe that organizations that are fundamentally religious in nature should be compelled by law to abandon the very precepts of their religion. So with respect to compelling, for example, a church to make abortion available as a paid option under its health plan would run contrary to those fundamental precepts. I will perhaps shock some of you. I want to be clear that while I am very much a Catholic, I think that as a matter of societal policy, we need to rethink the accessibility and appropriate availability with monitoring and dispensation of some forms of contraception. Because if we cannot change attitudes and behaviors on the part of some people, I would argue that it is better to make contraception more readily available to those who will live exercise their human sexuality in a responsible way than to keep feeding the engine of abortion on demand. Because even if we have all of these protections in place, adoption, civic organizations, religious organizations to provide prenatal help, baby Moses laws, we are always going to be up against a liberal argument that we have to allow abortion on demand. And I think one way to undercut that is to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies. And again, if we want to delve into the theology of that a little bit more over the course of the evening, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. For a moment, let's flip to Fairfax County School Board. I know that's a local issue, but it is not a local issue. Fairfax County School Board has passed a new policy adding gender identity to its non-discrimination policy. Thus, the school board opens girls' showers, locker rooms, bathrooms, and sporting teams to male students who identify as female and vice versa. Moreover, a statement from the state's Attorney General has allowed this, even though many believe it's a clear violation of Virginia's Dillon Rule. Is this such a good thing? And should the state prohibit or encourage such policies?
Well, it is first and foremost a local issue, and the reason I mention that, of course, is almost all school policy is set by local school boards. So what gets done here may be very different from what's done in Spotsylvania or Gotchland or Gate City or what have you. But the fact remains that it is a sensitive topic right now, and the State Board of Education does have a certain statutory role to play in setting standards, in defining curricula, and so on. And so I think we need to at least, look at the issue and address its underpinnings. My belief is that there is a distinction to be drawn between fully reasonable and legally consenting adults to make life decisions for themselves about how they want to live their lives. We're all Christians, or I think most of us are in the room. We adhere to a certain Judeo-Christian set of ethics, and I think we all try to be very tolerant. And if a fully grown adult decided that he or she wishes to, change sexes through surgery and lifestyle, that's a lifestyle choice. But here we're talking about children, our children. And I will confess that I struggle with the concept of gender fluidity. I realize it's a sensitive issue. I am not for a moment saying that I have the definitive answer on what's involved. But I think as a standard of reasonableness, as a parent myself, among other fellow parents, I think we are all viscerally uncomfortable with the notion that people who are anatomically boys could use girls' facilities, or vice versa. People who are anatomically female use boys' facilities, or demand to play on the opposite sex's sports teams, and so on. I believe it is fundamentally inappropriate when one's lifestyle choice becomes an imposition on another institution or other people. So, for example, forcing a company and its employees at will, based on an individual, to change the pronouns that are used toward that particular individual, or to have to retool its IT system to reflect that Mr. Smith now has to be reclassified as Ms. Smith, and after a quarter or half a year be changed back, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not competent from a psychological childhood development or other perspective to talk about the psychology of what's involved here, and I don't pretend to. But to answer the question most directly, I would look to work with members of all parties on our school boards across the state to try to find a standard of reasonableness on which we all can agree that respects our traditions and our the majority's social mores and standards.
Thank you. You just mentioned that school boards are generally a local issue.
And everywhere.
Yeah, and is there anything that the General Assembly can do concerning educational needs of children?
Such as?
Can a law be passed, for instance, that would outlaw all this transgender stuff?
Oh, I'm sorry, you said educational needs.
Educational needs.
Sorry. Well, I think the short answer, and I'm not a parliamentarian or a jurist, but I believe the answer is yes, a law could be passed. The question is whether such a law should be passed, or is it better to allow local elected school boards to adopt policies and set regulations that are most appropriate for that locality. Admittedly, that begs the question of the possibility of a patchwork of regulatory, legal, and guidance standards across the Commonwealth. And it's a nettlesome issue. I mean, there's no way around it. For my part, I have no desire personally to torment or somehow put additional pressure on young people, any given young person, when young people today are already under enormous pressures, many of which we didn't have to deal with in our day and age, and I think this is largely responsible for that, but that's a whole other issue. So I think the answer to the question is, I believe that local school boards under existing law should be empowered to make decisions that reflect the majority opinion, the consensus of the local community. I think there probably is a role, however, for legislation, again, in a Dillon Rule state, where if a substantial plurality, if not a majority, of local, county, or city school boards expresses concern about wanting to establish a uniform standard that describes what the limits we as a Commonwealth are willing to accept and those that we consider to be on the pale, then yes, I think there is. And that's where open and honest debate at the legislative level has a role to play. Do I think that young people who are legally minors, who feel that they don't fit into, a given norm for being, heterosexual or a certain, social category, need to be ostracized and penalized? No. I mean, I think as Christians and parents, again, we need to work with young people and do everything we can to help them get through all of the difficulties associated with adolescence. But I will say that I think there may be a certain line beyond which, we don't want to go. And again, compelling school systems, any one individual, to have to flip-flop back and forth over the course of any calendar year to invent new pronouns, to provide what most would consider an unreasonable accommodation because of a fluid sense of one's own gender, then I think there is room for discussion at the legislative level. But folks, it's a knotty issue and one that will not please everybody across the entire Commonwealth, and we're going to just have to tackle it head on.
Let's stick with Dillon Rule. What's the Dillon Rule?
In short, the Dillon Rule is based on a precept of a jurist, I believe it was in Kansas, I don't want to be, it was the Midwest, the Plain States, who basically enunciated a principle that became established as the Dillon Rule, under which the Commonwealth of Virginia operates, that basically says no municipal law may trump state law. So if the state says that X must be done, then localities may not exempt people from conforming with that law. If the state law says that Z may not be done, then localities may not pass a law that contravenes the state statute, and Virginia is indeed a Dillon Rule state. It doesn't mean that localities have no authority. Ask anybody on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors with the multi-billion-dollar budget that this county manages and executes every year. It simply means that, again, local law cannot trump state law, in essence.
Let's talk about school choice. our current public school system allows parents almost no choice in selecting the schools the children will attend, and sending a child to a private or religious school presents a huge economic burden or impossibility to many parents, especially those with low incomes. Do you support providing low-income children scholarships to attend private schools their families choose through the Educational Improvement Scholarship Tax Credit Program?
There again, that's another difficult issue that we've been grappling with in Virginia for quite some time now. My preference fundamentally is to once again explore and price out what traditionally is considered a voucher system, where parents can be enabled under certain rules and regulations to be able to redirect the equivalent of some of the tax dollars that would go toward public education system into some alternative form of approved elementary or secondary education. The issue of giving scholarships gets into a complicated system of setting thresholds. At what point is one's income sufficiently low to warrant a scholarship, and the fact that costs of living across the Commonwealth, even just 100 or 150 miles, vary dramatically. And there again, we get into all sorts of problems and people arguing about their ability to be eligible for a scholarship based on their zip code and so on. And I think that would be unfortunate. I think, first of all, again, this is an issue for people who really are immersed in local education issues, and we have a number of wonderful people either on or running for our school board, and I think they're more expert on this than I. But to address the question head on, I believe there must be, under our legal system, some form of flexibility that gives parents of children, not just in Fairfax County, and we have some issues here in Fairfax, but across the Commonwealth, in districts where their particular school is underperforming and is ill-serving the needs of that student population as a whole, or perhaps merely the needs of their particular child, should have some flexibility in being able to logistically and financially place that child in either a private or parochial school so that that child may achieve the full limit of his or her God-given potential. I don't have a specific answer for you on a dollar value or how that would work. That is the sort of thing where expert people would present testimony from all sides before one or more committees of the General Assembly, and then I, with an open mind, would listen and make a determination based on what I think makes the most sense. But fundamentally, I believe we need to give more parents more choice, so long as we do it in an equitable way and we don't destroy the budget, in the process. There has to be a balance, but I believe reasonable people of good conscience can find reasonable ways of improving upon the existing system, not for its own sake, but again, for the betterment and the long-term opportunity and potential of our children and future generations.
What's your position on mandatory pre-K education?
In short, I am against mandatory pre-K education, and I am against the notion of a state-run, state-directed, lowest common denominator pre-K in which it is staffed by clock punchers who basically are there to do a job and are not motivated in the same way that our public school teachers and our parochial school teachers are motivated and are really emotionally invested in the welfare of the children. What do I support instead? I support a government-directed, government-overseen effort to exploit market principles to diversify and make more plentiful a range of options for more accessible, high quality, more affordable early childhood development options for our parents and our children across the Commonwealth. In many cases where there exist established preschools that have degreed teachers in early childhood development, structured curricula, and so on. I probably shouldn't name names, but if you've ever been or dealt with Kitty Country here in Fairfax or the Reston Child Center in Reston, something like tax credits, instead of just giving the money, tax credits would enable those for-profit centers to retain those teachers who have degrees in childhood development and better serve more children by making it possible for those centers to afford to pay those teachers appropriately. In other instances, particularly in suburban and more rural areas, people tend to rely more on what are called family daycare centers. Basically, one spouse or two spouses will get licensed and run a daycare in their home. There, tax credits don't make as much sense, but with $1.6 billion already in the rainy day fund, if our economy continues to grow, I think we could afford to put aside some more money to create subsidies for lower middle and lower income parents who cannot afford childcare otherwise. And why is this important? A, for those of us in a high cost of living area like Fairfax, I can tell you from personal experience, infant daycare costs about $2,000 a month or more. So even for affluent families, it's a great burden. For lower income families, particularly new immigrant families, they're already working two jobs, perhaps with one spouse working two jobs as well, which means neither of them can go and complete that GED or a college degree and get a better job with better income. Maybe a job with better benefits, a job that allows them more money to invest in their kids and their future. So we want to make it possible for those people to have reliable, high-quality, affordable childcare so that they can better themselves, get a better job, and so on. And all of the statistics, my friends, underscore that children who get proper early childhood development support are much more likely to graduate from high school, much less likely to get involved in gangs or other criminal activity, and much more likely to go on to college or vocational school and develop a trade. It is not so much a cost, but an investment in our future, and I believe that market-based early childhood development is something that we need to take a much closer look at in the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue on education, but start shifting into immigration. What's your position on proposals to allow undocumented immigrants to graduate from Virginia high schools across the state to in-state college tuition under certain circumstances? For instance, if they apply for permanent residency and they are a parent filed, and they're a parent which files the Virginia income tax, state income tax.
As you may know, that was a bill introduced by my opponent. It failed to make it out of committee, and were I on the committee, I would have voted against it as well. We, again, most of us here are Christians, or at least we are steeped in that Judeo-Christian ethic. We want to take care of those who are here and are in need of assistance. We certainly want young people who are here while they're here to have the benefit of appropriate education, socialization, and so on. But there has to be a line drawn. And in a state at a time when in-state tuition slots already are too scarce, there aren't enough to go around for children who are legal residents of the Commonwealth, I think that, again, a facile, fig leaf of a bill that allows one simply to file a single Virginia income tax return, even if the form basically says, I didn't work at all last year. I have zero income. Or, I ran a lemonade stand for a day and I made $7. And, I didn't have to pay any tax. But by goodness, I filed my income tax return, so I want my in-state tuition. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I don't want to penalize young people and deprive them of the opportunity to get a higher education, I don't believe it is appropriate or fair to the taxpayers of Virginia to allow in-state tuition slots to be taken up by those who are not legal residents of the Commonwealth. So I think that's the key distinction. Immigration at writ large is a whole other issue, but with respect to higher education, the point here is that to qualify for in-state tuition, one must meet the existing standard for residency and citizenship in order to be eligible to qualify for that in-state tuition.
Well, let's talk about immigration on a larger issue. Under federal law, immigration has become a human rights issue, and Northern Virginia has become a target recipient region for those arriving illegally. It's stressing all of our public resources. What do you propose to do at the state level to address this problem? Obviously, we need a humane approach.
Correct. Everyone has heard this before. We all know it fundamentally. We are a country, a nation of immigrants. We have all of us come from somewhere else. Immigration and diversity are some of the bedrocks of our society. They enrich our society, they enrich our culture, they help to grow our economy, and I believe that America is and ought to continue to be a country that is welcoming to people from all around the world. I merely believe and insist that that process by which people may immigrate is done in accordance with our established laws. And there are reasons for those laws. Again, no country can survive, no country can maintain its sovereignty if it effectively loses control of its borders. And that is the fundamental problem that we face today. Over 100,000 undocumented immigrants per month coming across the southern border, being handed a notice to appear because there is a legal backlog of 3 or 4 years. So they're given a notice to appear and an ankle bracelet, which is immediately cut off. And according to law enforcement sources, well over 89% of all those who are given a notice to appear never appear for their immigration hearing. So here again, it becomes a fundamental issue of equity and fairness. We talk about equity all the time, but we don't really practice what we preach when it comes to those who are here legally and are paying taxes and supporting our infrastructures and systems. So we as a people, as a Commonwealth, as a country, cannot accept an unlimited number of undocumented immigrants. We certainly cannot afford to give all of them free health care when we still have veterans who are waiting under the new VA, sometimes for months at a time, to see a specialist or get certain treatment. And as someone who travels the world and has met want to be prospective immigrants all around the world who have been waiting for years for their number to come up through the lottery system, who speak English beautifully, who have a beautiful track record working. They're in service industries. They are in professions that we need. We have shortages of doctors. We have shortages of shop owners and entrepreneurs. Why is it that because there is a land bridge on the southern border that we, in fact, are not able to control the flow of that border, including immigrants who come from all over the world illegally by means of that southern border? So in short, our state needs to enforce its existing laws to make sure that those who receive benefits paid by tax dollars are here legally. If we need short-term assistance to help people who are here under federal law to survive, to live and meet basic human needs, that's a temporary thing, and there are federal programs to support that. But the bottom line answer is we have immigration laws for a reason. They should be humanely enforced.
Staying on the same topic, in 2019, the Virginia General Assembly debated bills that would effectively allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's license. What's your position on this and similar bills?
In short, I am against such bills. I understand the argument, ladies and gentlemen. If people are here and federal law, for whatever reason, allows them to be here for some either defined or undefined period of time, and if they are in compliance with our criminal statutes, that it makes sense for them to be able to operate a motor vehicle and to do so in accordance with the laws and regulations we've set, and that if they are able to pass the same test and standards as everyone else, that they should be allowed to do so. I think fundamentally that in effect puts the cart before the horse. If we are going to extend those privileges and extend a legal form of photo identification to people whom we know are not legal residents of these United States, then I think we are starting on a slippery slope toward a virtually unconstrained menu of benefits and offerings that will be accorded to those who are not legal residents of the country or the state. I suppose one could introduce into the General Assembly a piece of legislation that would make provision for some form of operator's permit, potentially, that would require those operating a motor vehicle, perhaps even a commercial vehicle, to meet certain standards to help ensure safe operation of, say, a contractor's truck or some other commercial vehicle. We could consider it. But the important thing, I think, is not to give what is widely considered to be a uniform certificate of legal identity. I mean, the proverbial photo ID that one has to show in order to document one's identity, the driver's license, should not be given to those who are known to be illegal residents of our Commonwealth. And by extension, if you're going to ask the question, I believe that those who are apprehended for criminal activity should be screened for their immigration status, and we should stop this nonsense of allowing people, as Montgomery County has done, to release people on their own recognizance when they have been apprehended for one or another violation and allow them to go out and perpetrate violent crimes, most often against other members of the immigrant community. So again, there has to be a standard of reasonableness and a fundamental respect for the law of the land. We can always look for reasonable accommodations to ensure public safety, but that's not synonymous with basically abrogating or ignoring our laws because they exist for a purpose.
You sort of alluded to this next question in your previous one. Do you support sanctuary cities/state policies? Can the state make a sanctuary state policy? You were talking about the Dillon rule earlier, that would preclude cities from doing the same.
I believe, again, that would be, it would have to withstand judicial scrutiny, but I believe the answer probably is yes. If the Commonwealth's General Assembly were to pass a bill and the governor were to sign that bill that says the Commonwealth of Virginia will not cooperate to the extent under federal law with federal authorities in order to, identify those who have committed crimes or otherwise here illegally, I believe one could pass such a law. I am wholeheartedly opposed to any such law. Again, we all want to be humane. We all want to do the right thing, but in some instances, the right thing is to take those who have been identified as having violated the laws of our land, of our Commonwealth, especially those who have committed a criminal infraction, and if they are determined to be here illegally, they should be deported post haste. My friends, this is one of those common sense kinds of issues around which I have trouble wrapping my thought process when others can contest this argument. We've all heard the cases, the infamous one on the Embarcadero in San Francisco, where an individual had been deported 3 or 4 times and kept coming back. An individual who had served time in a U.S. penitentiary and was known to be in the municipality and was not deported. And he got off because he claimed he found a handgun on the boardwalk and picked it up and it discharged. The cases in Montgomery County recently, the cases of an illegal immigrant some years ago who was driving with a license, who became intoxicated and drove into a car and killed a Catholic nun. There are examples like this all across America. I believe that we don't give legal sanctuary to people who commit criminal offenses and claim that they are somehow being persecuted religiously or some other grounds. Why in the world would we give sanctuary to those who commit criminal acts and are found to have entered into and to live in our country illegally? I think it defies common sense, and so I am prepared to accept the slings and arrows of those who disagree with me, but that's my position.
Thanks. What do you think should be done to prevent and address human trafficking at the state and community level?
Besides elect Steve Dragna. That's a yes. Okay. If you have looked at my website and if you're getting my emails, you know that this is an issue that actually is very much on my radar. Frank Wolf, a dear friend and mentor of mine, really worked on this issue for many, many years. He immersed himself in it at the federal level. And I was astounded recently at an event when he told me that law enforcement officials told him that in Fairfax County alone, there currently are 81 known locations, addresses, in which human trafficking of whatever flavor or sexual trafficking have occurred or very likely are occurring and are in the process of being queued up, if you will, for law enforcement action. It simply overwhelms the ability of law enforcement at present to deal with them all. And I find that astounding and astonishing that in this day and age in these United States, that in Fairfax County alone, we would have 81 locations where we know that people are being held captive against their will to serve as domestic servants or to be forced to labor against their will, or worst of all, are being sold into sexual slavery day after day, multiple times a day. So I would do a couple of things. Number one, the state needs to provide greater attention and some additional resources to statewide coordination of law enforcement through the Virginia State Police, primarily to backstop, to provide state-level assistance to local law enforcement. I'm a localist by nature in almost everything, and I think the same holds true for local law enforcement. They know best what's going on in their locality, but they need some extra oomph. They need some extra technology, some extra resources. Secondly, we need better coordination between the Virginia State Police, the Office of the Attorney General, the advocacy offices for people who are victims of various forms of abuse, because they have tentacles into the local community and they can help identify some of those problems. Third, we need to be diligent and remorseless in rooting out the perpetrators of these kinds of crimes. We should stiffen penalties for convictions for those kinds of crimes. We should in place assistance programs for those who are freed from those kinds of circumstances, so that they aren't simply given a pat on the back and turned out into, say, a local immigrant community that is not equipped or empowered to assist them with overcoming the trauma and transitioning into normal social society. So those are just the few of the things that I think we need to do. This is a problem that unfortunately still is given short shrift by too many in our General Assembly as a problem, for other people to deal with. But ladies and gentlemen, the problem is with us right here in Fairfax County and across our Commonwealth, and we have a moral and legal obligation to stamp it out.
Yes.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
Am I too much for you?
No, we're going fine.
Okay, you're in charge.
Let's just take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Holler when it's 5 minutes. Currently licensed gun dealers must perform background checks to ensure the purchasers are not prohibited from owning firearms. Non-licensed dealers, including vendors at gun shows, however, do not have to perform such background checks to potential purchasers. Do you favor expanding Virginia's law on background checks?
The short answer is yes. I am a staunch defender of our Second Amendment rights. I don't support any sort of confiscations or bans, but I think, and on countless doorsteps in conversations with people who also are firearms owners, it just makes sense for anyone who is going to purchase or be the transferee of a firearm to complete Virginia's version of the instant background check system. Some of you may not be aware, Virginia's system is a little bit different. It includes the federal National Instant Background Check System, or NICS, along with 4 other state-maintained databases, and yet it's very comprehensive, very efficient, and very quick. Most checks are accomplished within scant minutes, 15 minutes at most, and it's a very simple and effective way of making sure that anyone who is about to take possession of a firearm does not have any of the disqualifying factors or flags, and I think it makes sense. Moreover, Virginia's system, in distinction from those of some other states, does not result in the creation of a registry, and that is one of the things that very often gives very ardent Second Amendment proponents fits, is the notion that by requiring a background check even for private sales, that the government is in effect creating a registry of exactly who owns what, where, in what locations, and so on. And I agree, that ought not to be something that the government ought to be in the business of doing. Under Virginia law, after 60 days, the record of the transaction is expunged. It's kept to make sure that there are no issues legally with the transfer and can be investigated, but that's it. So the short answer to the question is that even though I, as a life member of the NRA, earned a grade of C from the institution because I had the temerity to suggest that we might want to have people who are going to receive a firearm checked for being a fugitive from justice under the influence of narcotics, a wife beater, having been dishonorably discharged, and so on, is somehow inappropriate. I am prepared to carry that burden, but beyond that, I think that's basically what it's all about. Trust but verify, and once you've verified, leave people alone.
What about gun ownership by convicted felons?
Well, it's illegal under present law. I would be inclined to keep the current law as it is. Again, any legislator, I think, should keep an open mind. If somebody wanted to introduce a piece of legislation and make an argument that there is some certain class of felony for an economic crime and that the individual has served his or her time and has had an exemplary record and has reason to fear, I don't know. I mean, one could make the argument, and one should keep an open mind, but viscerally and fundamentally, I think that our existing laws are there for a reason. They've served us well over the course of time, and certainly for any sort of violent criminal activity, that should be a disqualifying factor. And if we're not going to get into a question, I will mention while I have time, I also favor strengthening current laws to deter criminal use of a firearm. Many of you may remember Project Exile in this state, which strengthened the penalties for gun crimes. It worked wonders in Richmond and elsewhere until it was abandoned under a Democratic gubernatorial administration. And I support Majority Leader Todd Gilbert's movement to implement Project Ceasefire. You can look it up online. It's a targeted intervention and diversion program done jointly between local law enforcement and community leaders, say civic leaders, religious leaders, to identify primarily young people who are most at risk for being perpetrators of gun violence or victims of same, and letting them know the stakes involved and the risks to them and their family and the consequences for them and their family and the families of those whom they threaten, and finding alternative means of resolving their disagreements and giving them some tools and opportunities, employment, suited to their skills and so on, to help divert them from, criminal activity, gang activity, and so on. And I think we need a 360-degree comprehensive approach to those kinds of problems.
Thank you. Speaking of 360-degree approaches, the opioid crisis is a national epidemic. Is there anything that can be done over and above the tools that are already available in terms of legislation in the Commonwealth that can help the medical community, the schools, social services, and law enforcement to wrap its arms around this problem?
I don't profess to be a subject matter expert in this area. It's a complicated issue. It involves medical and physiological issues, psychological dependency, issues associated with the possibility of inappropriate, if not illegal, advertising and hyping of the products that had a very real potential to get people addicted. Criminal activity on the part of physicians and those able to prescribe opioids who did so knowingly and capriciously in order to enrich themselves without regard for the consequences of those for whom they were prescribing them. It's a very big, complicated issue. But I think the fundamental answer to the question is emphasis. If we don't make it a priority for government and for our society, we are never going to make progress. So let me say a couple of things. First of all, with the understanding I am not a medical professional or a psychological professional, I think the old adage, applies here as well. First of all, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, okay? Let's enforce standards and guidelines such that we don't keep putting new addicts in waiting into the pipeline. Let's make sure that we are cracking down on the inappropriate, capricious, or illegal prescribing of those classes of drugs. So let's, in other words, try to, extinguish the back end of the fuse so that it doesn't keep on burning forever and ever. Second, let's concentrate governmental emphasis and coordination among subject matter expert and law enforcement bodies to make sure that we're addressing some of the root causes of the problem. First of all, keep people from becoming addicted in the first place. Second, more active law enforcement targeted against those who are still trying to find ways illegally or unethically to prescribe these for people who shouldn't be having them. Third, better treatment programs and accessibility of treatment for people who recognize that they have become addicted and want to get off them. Yes, there would be some cost associated with that to the state. I believe it pales in comparison to the cost of the state of dealing with the health problems that are caused to these people who are addicts and the societal problems of some of them that they cause when they turn to criminal activity, sometimes violent criminal activity, to sustain their habits, or simply if they are not in control of their own faculties and cause motor vehicle accidents and so on. This is a very real societal problem, and we are only going to address it successfully if we attack it as a society.
To completely change the topic here, our previous delegate, Dave Elbow, did a phenomenal job in keeping the voters informed about bills presented, passed, or rejected in Richmond. He also attended annual home association meetings, answered any and all issues on the that the residents have. What is your plan for facilitating communications with the people in the district you represent?
Well, That's it's actually, for once, an easy question. I'm pretty much an open book. I think many of you in this room, I see many of you, know that if you post a comment or anything on the comment form on my website, I answer you myself, usually within 24 hours. If you send an email directly to me or to my currently campaign office, which I hope will soon be my General Assembly office address, we answer you. You can call me on the phone. Most of you have gotten a door hanger from me, either in person or on your door. What does it have on there? It has my email address and my cell number. This one right here that you can call. So we send you regular emails, many of you who are on my list. Some of you may wish that I didn't send you so many emails. But I'm proud to report that in a district with only about 55,000 registered voters, there are over 10,000 of you within the district who are on my email list today. And that's as a non-incumbent challenger. I think we're communicating pretty well, quite frankly. We share not only, political arguments, but news that you can use. You may recall that when people complained about the condition of the roads and the potholes, and I pointed out that our incumbent delegate hadn't done anything, hadn't proposed any legislation or taken any action to address our absolutely abysmal secondary roads, we offered up to all of you who are on the email list the opportunity to report a road. And we compiled all of your road and intersection complaints, and we forwarded those to VDOT. The only shortcoming was we didn't have standing because, I'm not an elected official. We couldn't hound VDOT to follow up, but we asked each and every one of you whether or not you had gotten a response from VDOT, and we offered to report it again if you hadn't. So all I can say by way of example is many of you have had me in your homes for meet and greets. You've been to my fundraisers in people's homes. You've had me stand on your doorstep. I'm in this because I'm a true believer. I take this stuff very seriously. I encourage you to contact me at any time during the course of my tenure in office. If you're going to have an HOA meeting or a coffee clutch and you want to invite me, please do. I still have to make a buck every now and again and travel. There may be times when I cannot attend, but I'll take a rain check and I will come on a subsequent date. People are what this whole thing really is all about. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And if I am elected, I can assure you I will be happy to hear from you at any time. And I will do my level best to respond to your question and concern in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you. Let me take the next two and sort of tie them together. They're district questions. Can you talk about the top infrastructure initiatives in the district, and what are the greatest economic challenges you face in the district?
What are the greatest economic challenges that the district
in the
faces?
District. Yes.
All right, well, let's deal with those in order then. We have plenty of transportation issues. I think you all know that. In the time allotted, it will be difficult to touch upon them all. Let me say this. Let me start first with the shameless political plug, and we'll get that out of the way. If you are on my email list, or if you would like to be, I already have shared with the 10,000 plus people on my list 3 pages of specific, discrete, near, mid, and long-term transportation priorities that I believe need to address. Starting with paving our roads right now, to things like that, to eliminating bottlenecks like the one in Run 23 South where it goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes and then inexplicably back to 4 lanes, the CSX Railroad Bridge on Route 1 going into Prince William, where again that dilapidated structure forces a bottleneck. We have problems with the train line. We need to get that removed so we have 4 lanes going through without and so on. Transit and so on. I have plans for finally getting agreement with Maryland on an eastern crossing that we've been talking about for 30 years to go from the aptly named South Bridge community in Prince William to extend the Prince William Parkway across the Potomac River and make it possible for long-haul traffic, whether it's vacationers or commercial traffic, to bypass the Capitol Beltway to get up to the northeast and make it easier for Virginia residents to work in the naval facilities all in southern Maryland, to make it easier for Marylanders to come and work in the growing areas around Fort Belvoir and Quantico and so on. My opponent, at least as of 5 o'clock tonight when I last checked, doesn't even mention the word transportation on her website on the issues page. We have a lot of issues, folks, but my pledge to you is that I take transportation very seriously. I have a number of ideas for new and innovative technologies to make mass transit more palatable, more desirable for people to ride, more efficient and less costly than these enormous heavy rail, multi-billion-dollar boondoggles that WMATA keeps peddling. If you'd like to talk about that more afterwards, I'm happy to do so. In terms of the biggest economic challenge for the district, I don't think we can single out the district. We are inextricably woven into the economic fabric of Fairfax County and Northern Virginia as a whole. I believe that the biggest challenge for us regionally remains sustaining our current rate of economic growth without sacrificing the quality of life that we have come to expect and become accustomed in this region. That starts with taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, our property taxes in Fairfax County alone have gone up by about 25% over the last 5 years. We have an onerous gross receipts tax on small and medium businesses that starts from day one. We have lost, in large measure, the ability to incentivize other businesses to come into Fairfax County to establish and grow. We drew Amazon because we have such a talented workforce, a good transportation network, mass transit, and so on, and a solid economic foundation. The challenge, though, will be to sustain that for the next 10, 20, 30 years if we don't sustain economic conditions that will continue to draw businesses here and provide the kind of tax revenue based on lower rates that will sustain all of those quality of life demands that we have. We cannot continue to tax our way into prosperity. We have to be prosperous by encouraging free enterprise and business expansion.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just going to ask you the question about Amazon, but you just covered it.
Well, if you have a specific, a different, element
Well,
that we can
it's
talk
basically
about.
how can the district, a lot of the Amazon funds are going to other jurisdictions, and we're only getting a very small portion for our growing area. How do we reap some of those funds?
Well, I think we will. For one, I'm not shedding any tears that HQ2 will not physically be present in Fairfax County. I think most of you know, and I'm not the first to tell you this, most people have pointed out that Arlington is pretty much built out. There's really not much more space to build. So the overwhelming majority of the people who are going to fill those new jobs are going to be looking, ideally, to live close in. And that's going to mean some parts of Alexandria and a lot of people in Fairfax County. Now, it's a double-edged sword. We need the growth, we need the infusion of new talent and opportunities, but parts of our county already are very densely populated. So it's a mixed blessing. I think the fundamental answer to the question is we are going to reap a lot of the benefits because the people who work at HQ2 are going to live in this county. They will be earning, we would hope, market or above market salaries. If we set our tax rates appropriately so that we don't scare them off, we will actually reap more in tax revenue because we will take a smaller portion of a much larger tax base. So we'll have more money to invest in the kinds of things that we need to improve transportation, improve services and quality of life. And I believe the shot in the arm that HQ2 is going to give in terms of the Virginia Tech and George Mason Innovation Campus campuses there, are going to create new opportunities for our residents, will create new opportunities for our young people just coming out of school and our younger professionals to have new outlets, new opportunities to innovate and bring additional revenue and economic benefits to our region. So I think the challenge will be from a state perspective, from a legislative perspective, to make sure that local governments, and I'm looking at you, Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, don't stop this vision of looking at us as a cash cow and shake everybody upside down by the ankles until there's no more money to fall out of your pockets. If you cut people a break on their rate, people will want to live here knowing that they can afford to do it, and we will have more total revenue as a whole because more people will live here and make more money by virtue of having better jobs, and we will all be the better for it. So it's about thinking smarter, not richer, in terms of taking your money and your money because government knows how to spend it better than you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Here are some random ones. Do you believe in term limits?
So do I believe in term limits?
Term limits on delegates and senators like there are for governor.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I have gone back and forth on this over the years. Fundamentally, at first blush, it sounds like a great idea, and I know it's very big among conservative circles, and it keeps people from becoming legislators for life, and I understand that concern. There are a couple of issues here in play, particularly in Virginia, that have caused me kind of to move away from that position. First, with respect to Virginia as a whole, we have a citizen legislature. Our legislators serve only, part-time. You've all heard this before. It's not so part-time that the $17,000 a year you get paid works out to a great hourly rate. It's a lot more than part-time, but people are obliged to have regular jobs. They are obliged to remain integrated into their individual communities and keep a finger on the pulse. And I think that's healthy. So I don't know that here in Virginia we have the same kind of problems that we see at the congressional level. Now, let's put our finger on exactly what the problem is at the congressional level. And I'll be the first to tell you, there are several people I can think of in my own party who are poster children for this problem. They're wonderful people, brilliant people right on the issues, but I think it's fundamentally wrong when some of these people become such fixtures in Washington that they end up just renting a room in the home of a supporter back home in the Midwest to maintain their legal residence, and they become creatures of Washington. And they live in a suite in the Watergate or in a townhouse in Old Town, and they forget where they came from. And I think what people need to do is, not deprive people of the opportunity to have representatives that they like for as long as they want. Because what's the real alternative there? If you're forced to turn out people who have some seniority and experience, it's that much easier for elected representatives in Congress to get buffaloed by career staff members than who tell them that this is how it is or how it needs to be. I think people as citizens, I'm sorry to break the news to you, need to pay more attention. People need to be more engaged, not in politics per se, but in policy and what their representatives are doing. And if Senator Smith is known not to ever go back to Wisconsin or wherever, then you ought to vote him or her out of office. Here in Virginia, because we have a citizen legislature, I don't believe we need to set a limit on the number of terms that one can serve, but it does mean that every one of you, ladies and gentlemen, has an obligation to stay informed and always ask yourself every 2 or 4 years, is this guy or gal really still paying attention to my family's needs, or is he or she on autopilot and just wants to be a delegate or senator for life? It's really up to you, but if you practice, if you participate and practice what you ought to, you get the representation that you deserve.
Thank you.
And I'd like to give it to you.
I want to thank the audience for these great questions you're sending up here. I'm trying to gather them all together, but man, there's some things I'd never thought of, but they're very important to what we're doing here, and I just want to thank you for that. We're starting to wind down. We got about 15 more minutes, but so we'll knock out a couple easy ones. They're not necessarily easy, maybe short ones. Do you support a law that makes it illegal for state-level candidates to take campaign contributions from non-residents and from organizations that don't pay Virginia state taxes? Why or why not?
That's a new one. I have not been asked that question before. I am inclined to say no, because what we do in Virginia, it's relatively unique. Might be unique, probably not, but we place no limits on the amount of money that any individual or corporation or PAC may give to a candidate, but we absolutely insist that every one of those be reported. And I think that's the fundamental issue here. I agree with the argument, the theoretical, the philosophical argument, that there is too much money in politics nationally. And we're seeing it in spades here in Virginia. It sounds like the political speech, but it's just the reality, my friends. George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, all have given millions of dollars of their money to the state party, the Democratic Party, and other organizations in this state. There is a financier and his wife in Charlottesville who gave between them $1.5 million to the Democratic Party of Virginia. It made headlines. One of George Soros's PACs just last month gave an additional $350,000 to Planned Parenthood of Virginia in order for it to funnel that money to abortion on demand type candidates. So I think there's too much money sloshing around, but as sort of a constitutional conservative, I can't think of a good way to curtail it. Because if you put limits on people's ability to give, to support the causes in which they support and in which they believe, then I think you start to have a dampening effect on the vibrancy of our democracy. So I think the important thing is to ensure that all of the money that is contributed is reported. Second, that there are sunshine laws to make sure that we get away from some of the juggling that goes on. One quick example, under state law, and I'll pick on my opponent's party a little bit, if $300,000 comes in from outside and goes to a candidate's committee, and that candidate is well off and doesn't need it, and then gives the $300,000 to his or her PAC, and then the PAC in turn gives that $300,000 to a specific candidate, there will be in the aggregate $900,000 of donations reported, and it makes a given party or candidate seem much larger than life. So some sunshine laws to really let people know what's going on would be helpful, but I think the key is transparency here, and then once again, folks, it's up to all of you to pay attention. I will tell you honestly, if you didn't get my press release, over the summer, only 9% of my opponent's donations came from within the district. That should tell you something. 9% for the summer reporting period. We outraised her 2-to-1 in terms of number of donors in the district and twice as much money, total funds raised, from within the district. Of course, you got $300,000 from NARAL and Planned Parenthood. I can't compete with that, but I think that should count for something. If all of your support is coming from outside the district, what does that say?
Does the silence surrounding the 3 separate scandals of the top 3 Virginia state government officials concern you?
Absolutely. In a word, yes. Next question.
Next question.
Let's just delve into this a little bit, and I'm not going to give you the political harangue. It's about doing what's right and ethics. Are there many of us in the audience who have not done something stupid in our youth? Probably not. But what troubles me so much is the farcical responses to these things. Let's take our governor first. What? how did that get in there? I didn't put that there. For 20 years, I never looked in my own yearbook and noticed that there was that photo. And then, yeah, I did it. Nope, you can't prove it was me. So, no, I didn't do it. But I did once do it. You don't have a photo of it in a dance contest and so on. But I'm not going to resign. And then our Attorney General, the hypocrite general, who went on record and said our governor has lost his legitimacy and should resign. And a week later, he had his own blackface scandal, and of course he said, that was different. I'm not going to resign. And then worst of all, our lieutenant governor, I can't avoid the comparison with Brett Kavanaugh, right? Judge Kavanaugh dragged through a keyhole because of allegations from one woman who appears to have suffered some form of trauma, and we all feel for her. She couldn't document anything from 30 years ago. Where was the address? How I got there? Who took me home? Yes, I had a lot to drink. I never told anybody about it, but I'm certain it's Brett Kavanaugh. And he was flayed alive. In the case of Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, these were adult women who were able to cite, somewhat dated, some 10 years and whatever before, but venue, circumstances, specific action perpetrated, who was their attacker, and so on. And the Democratic Party in the General Assembly would not even agree to hold hearings to allow the two victims who said they weren't looking for criminal charges, because in some cases the statute of limitations had run out, but wanted to testify under oath on what had happened to them and give the accused the opportunity to respond. We got one excuse after another on why that shouldn't happen. There is such a double standard in play among the so-called progressive community who argue that anything that we do is essentially moral because we're the good guys and we know better than you folks and the little people what needs to be done. But by definition, anyone on the other side who doesn't agree with us automatically is a hate monger and an obstructionist and a Neanderthal who wants to turn back the clock. I, for one, have had my fill of it, and absolutely, I would like to see the three of them out of office. And I'm happy, everybody, make sure you get that on tape. I would love to see all three of them out of office.
It's very disturbing that citizens are being deprived of seeing party affiliations / endorsements for county candidates, such as school board members, specifically in the upcoming election and I believe in past elections. What do you think about this, and how can we as citizens get the power to provide this information on a ballot? Well,
first of all, I do not have an established position on the merits. Fundamentally, at present, it's a local issue. The county has decided that for county-level offices, and by the way, for the first time, that includes candidates for the Board of Supervisors. You may not know that. I think most of you do. But when you go to the polls, the candidates for individual magisterial district supervisors and the chairman will not be identified by party. I happen to think that is inappropriate. But it's a local issue. What I think I would say is if concerned citizens feel strongly enough about that and want to come to me prior to the start of the session in January, or others in the Commonwealth want to bring it to the attention of their representative in Richmond, it's the kind of thing that we can consider at the state level and debate and hear from subject matter experts on both sides. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there is an argument to be made by those who are student subject matter experts on good government that it behooves us to have candidates for local office not necessarily be assumed to think or perform a certain way simply by virtue of their party affiliation, but instead that it's incumbent on them to make their positions known and incumbent upon the voters to learn what those positions are and not simply go into the booth and vote straight party line. One can make the argument, I can understand that. I think it comes down to transparency. I think if one is affiliated with a given party, he or she should be identified as such. But I do like the idea that we, all of us as citizens, and I'm pretty loyal to the Republican Party that I know and love, but it's incumbent upon me to make my views known, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us not to just go in the booth and say, yellow lab runner, yeah, Republican, good. Cheshire cat, yeah, sure, Democrat, good. We have a responsibility, all of us, to really assess and evaluate those who would be responsible for making our laws. And shame on us if we just go in and vote straight party line without doing our diligence. So I guess I would say I have an open mind, but I am inclined to believe that if someone's affiliated with a given party, he or she should be so identified on the ballot.
Last question. Should your faith influence how you shape and/or vote on legislation?
I think that any person of good conscience should be, and I will say this of myself, my faith and my own personal moral grounding certainly influences and colors the lens through which I view the world, and therefore the lens through which I view existing and prospective legislation and issues. I bring a Christian, and I would argue, Catholic perspective, but at the same time, there were very valid reasons why our founding fathers mandated a separation of church and state. It doesn't mean that secular authority is rootless, that it is devoid of any form of grounding. It just means that none of us allows his or her particular religious or moral beliefs to exclude the process of reason, of rational thought, to evaluate arguments that are posed by others. And we as a society that has established the rights of free speech and freedom of religion and freedom of thought and free association should embrace that campaign of ideas, that arena of ideas, so that people who come from a Christian perspective that's conservative, or people who come from a sort of liberation theology Christian perspective, or from a Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever perspective, should be able to exchange in that free flow of ideas to figure out laws and regulations that serve the public interest as a whole, that reinforce those fundamental freedoms of ours to say what's on our mind, to worship as we please, and so on. And those rights that we enjoy come from the fact that there is no primacy given to one or another religion or moral perspective. When we go to make laws, we do so, all of us, as Americans, and in Richmond as Virginians. And I think that's important. So to sum up, I will certainly take my own religious underpinnings and my background with me. They are part of me. And I think this is important, especially for faith-based voters, to understand that I feel that I have a responsibility to keep an open mind and to try in all things to do what is right and just and moral and will serve the best interests of everyone in our society, individually and collectively.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dragna. And I want to thank you for being with us tonight, and I want to thank the audience for your participation in it. Maybe some of the questions didn't quite get asked like you wanted them to, but I tried to do my best. So do you want to, you've talked about just about everything there is. You have some time to make a closing statement if you would like.
I think I will. The audience is relatively small. Can everyone hear me if we don't do this? Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry? No, it's okay. First of all, ladies and gentlemen.
That mic's a hand mic.
I know. I don't want to blow any. If you guys can hear me, then we're okay. If you can't.
No, they can in the back.
Okay, great. All right.
We have wonderful acoustics here.
Maybe a little Sinatra or something. There you go. All right. How's this? I want to try to be, as intimate a conversation as I can have with the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you all for coming out on a weeknight. You all have lives and families and things to do. And I very much respect the fact and appreciate the fact that you took the time to come out and listen tonight. What I would like to say to you in closing is this. To quote Barack Obama, elections have consequences. And this year's election is far more consequential than most. I know people like to always say that, by gum, this election is the most important, but I tell you sincerely, the decisions that you make, the people that you and our fellow citizens, the people that you elect this year, will have a profound impact on the character of our Commonwealth for a very long time to come. If for no other reason than the fact that we will be conducting redistricting before the next General Assembly election in 2021. Also, the contrasts that lie before you and our fellow voters could not be more stark. On an individual level for the 42nd District, you have an individual who, again, I respect her right to have those opinions, but I believe is as wrong can be on all of the issues. Big government, a Green New Deal that would constitute a massive government intervention in our economy and our way of economic life, would spend millions upon millions of our tax dollars to favor certain types of energy systems over others, irrespective of their value or cost, to tax you more for the energy that you purchase, to raise your utility bills because they don't like the source of the power that Dominion and the other utilities get, and just charge you more money for everything, to insert government between you and your children in schools and not give you your parental rights to understand what's going on, to again treat you like a cash cow and shake you upside down by the ankles until there's no more money to fall out. In contrast, I am a believer in the model that we had under Dave Albo for 24 years, a reasonable, centrist approach that relies on a pro-family, pro-taxpayer, business-friendly philosophy and focuses on the kinds of kitchen table issues that affect our family's everyday quality of life. More broadly, as you know, we currently have only a single-seat majority in both the House of Delegates and the Senate of Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Hugo said it better than I could. The simple fact is, this is not your father's Democratic Party. If you go to bluevirginia.org or the State Democratic Party website, they are not bashful about telling us what they will do if they come into the majority. They will make abortion on demand a constitutional right in Virginia. They will increase energy taxes. They are determined to have us accede to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and the State Corporation Commission, not the utilities, but the State Corporation Commission, has confirmed that we can expect $5.9 billion in carbon taxes to be levied on our utilities as a result. Those taxes will be passed along to all of the residential and business customers in the state, again, because they know better. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a fundamental choice to make. Will we continue to follow a free enterprise system? Will we continue to have parents have primacy in the development and rearing of their children? Will we keep Virginia a state that is #1 for establishing, maintaining, and growing a business, one in which we create more and better jobs every year so that people can have more and better benefits rather than relying on least common denominator government handouts? Or will we embrace this new flavor of 1930s-style socialist government and control of our economy? In my view, the choice is clear. If, when you leave this evening, you believe that you agree with my perspective and my vision for Virginia's future, one in which every one of our young people and children will be enjoying equal opportunity and equipped with the resources, knowledge, and abilities and tools to achieve the full extent of their God-given potential, then I hope you will do a few things for me. I hope, first and foremost, that you will come out and vote on November 5th. Whatever else you do, please come out and vote. If you think you will not be able to vote for some reason on Election Day, take advantage of early voting at any of the local government centers or at the government center. Second, please talk to your neighbors. I know in this hyper-polarized environment, it's difficult to have a conversation sometimes with people. But for the sake of yourselves and your families, start that conversation across the hedge, at the bunco game, at the World Series party that you're having. Make sure people know that there is an election. Hey, do you know who your incumbent delegate is? Do you like what she stands for? Do you know that you have an alternative? Here's his website. Let people know, and please make a personal commitment to get at least 3 other people educated and informed and motivated to come out and vote. Third, please help me reach out to people whom neither you nor I currently knows. If you are supportive, please see us afterward outside. We're not allowed to give them to you in here. And take a bumper sticker and put it on your car and let the world know that there's an alternative. They're the good vinyl ones. They come off easily. If you're like me and you still don't like to put anything adhesive on your car, do what I do, get some clear tape and put it in your rear window, and you can take it off in a few weeks. If you are of a mind to, you can get one of these on a roll. We'll give you 10 or 12. Consider wearing one for the last 10 or 12 days of the campaign when you go out in the morning. And when people ask you, who's he? Tell them. If you work for a government agency or for a corporation that frowns on that kind of thing, take one with you when you leave in the morning and then put it on when you come home. And you're going to stop at the grocery store or the gas station or go do something with the kids on the weekend. We really have to get the word out. I cannot compete with the amount of money that my opponent has to spend on outreach between now and Election Day. So I could use that help. At the end of the day, we have to make a choice about the kind of Virginia in which we want to live and the kind of Virginia in which we want for our children and our children's children to grow up. I have tried tonight and through my website and my communication with you to enunciate a vision that I have for Virginia, one in which we will have an ever-increasing prosperity and quality of life based on exploiting our human potential and encouraging every citizen, especially our young people, to dream again and strive and invent and reach and occasionally fail and then get up and dust themselves off and go on again to make new achievements in information technology and medical technology and automotive technology and the life sciences and make our Commonwealth a shining example for the other 49 of these United States. On November 5th, with your support, we have the opportunity to begin to build that kind of vision for the future. Not maybe, not someday, but now. If you agree with that vision, I hope you will lend me your support on November 5th, and I assure you that together we will roll on to victory on Election Day and build exactly that kind of future. Thank you for coming tonight. God bless you all. Have a good night.